All right, welcome everybody. Today is our second webinar for YSEALI Seeds for the Future Small Grants Competition. I am excited to welcome you all and dive deeper into the tips and advice on how to make your proposal better so you can submit a winning proposal for the YSEALI Seeds for the Future 2020 application. My name is Natalia Eden. I'm a program officer at Cultural Vistas, the organization that administers the YSEALI Seeds for the Future program. And just a few moments here for those who just joined us, you will see the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, which is a question answer feature. If you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to type in your questions over there. Now you also have a chat box here. So the chat box for us is just to check with each other if there is some issues with sound or presentation or anything like that. Let me know there. Otherwise, your questions will be answered by my colleague Nalindra, who is here with me today, and she will be answering under the name YSEALI Seeds. And a quick reminder again, I will be covering most of the questions during the presentation, so maybe you want to hold off a little bit on typing in your questions right away, just because I might be answering them during the presentation. Okay, I hope everybody ready. Let's dive in. So for those of you who might not know, I'm sure probably not that many, but YSEALI Seeds for the Future is a small grants competition, and it provides funding for most promising young leaders in Southeast Asia so they can create their projects to really enrich and impact their communities, their countries, the region overall. And we have 4 themes that you can submit your projects under. It's civic engagement, education, economic growth, and sustainable development. All right, so this is just a quick reminder from the first webinar. Again, the reminder of our timeline. Our first webinar, how to create a successful YSEALI Seeds application, already happened last week. We are holding our webinars every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Jakarta time, starting October 8th. So today is our second webinar. And again, the recording of the webinar, if you were not able to attend, is on Cultural Vistas YouTube channel, and you see the link here for the entire playlist, and we will be uploading all of the webinar videos into that playlist on Cultural Vistas YouTube channel. So after this presentation, you can hurry up and go and see the first webinar just to have a complete picture of how to prepare better for this competition. All right, so our third webinar is very exciting. It's one of my favorite. Our third webinar will be dialogue with YSEALI Seeds grantees. We are inviting 4 amazing YSEALI Seeds 2019 winners who will be sharing about their experience with writing applications and competing in this program, and then actually implementing their projects. So tune in for that webinar. That would be next week, again, 7 p.m. Jakarta time. And our final webinar is right almost before the application deadline. Our final webinar is primarily for your questions and all of the answers. So we will tune in on the last Tuesday of October. So you could, just bring in all of the questions you have, and I'll be able to answer those hopefully. And again, another date to remember is application deadline. Okay, so the application deadline is October 31st at 11:59 p.m. Jakarta time. So make sure to submit your applications at least a day before the application deadline. I will be repeating this over and over again. Why we ask that is because typically, everybody starts submitting application on the very last day, in the very last moment. And, as we know, technology sometimes might not act in our best interest. So make sure that you allow yourself at least some time to submit everything on time. All right, and some other important dates here to keep in mind are the projects will be selected and teams will be notified if they won in the competition sometime by the end of December 2019. Okay, so then we will, those who are selected and notified, we will be sending emails to those specific teams from all of the countries. Then they will be selected to participate in the kickoff workshop. So 2 team members from each winning team will be participating in the kickoff workshop. It might be in Jakarta, Indonesia, or it might be in another place. It might be in Vietnam this year. So we will be notifying everybody about that. Now, the after January kickoff workshop, again, this is a specific time and place and meeting for the team to come together, all of the teams to come together and learn how to design, your reports, how to implement your projects, how to connect with other mentors and resources to make your project a success. The kickoff workshop is all paid, so you will not be spending any money on that. YSEALI Seeds for the Future will cover your flights and your stay at the hotel for 2 days during the kickoff workshop, and that's an incredible opportunity to connect with each other and learn how to make your project a success. All right, so after the kickoff workshop, everybody will be flying back to their countries and their communities and will start working hard on their projects. All right, so the implementation period will be from February to October, and then the final reporting on your projects will happen November 1st, 2020. Okay. All right, so that's the timeline overall. Just one thing to note here is that during the kickoff workshop, we will be discussing in depth about your guidelines for reporting and the dates for reporting and all of those things, specifically for those who already won and were selected for the program. All right, a couple of reminders about the application requirements. I still see some emails coming in asking about eligibility criteria. Now, this is very important. If you do not meet one of those eligibility criteria, you cannot submit your application for the YSEALI Seeds for the Future. Okay, so what are those eligibility criteria? First of all, citizenship. You must be a citizen of one of those countries, one of the YSEALI countries. So Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, or Timor-Leste. Okay, so and I will be talking later in the presentation that you will have 3 essential team members in your team to implement your project. Now, all of those 3 essential team members must be a citizen of one of those countries and must be also YSEALI members, okay? So second criteria, applicants must be between 18 and 35 years old. Some people were asking, what if I turn 35 next year, in 2021? That's okay, you can still apply. You are still within the limit of the year. If you are, let's say, already 36 or 37 and you want to participate in the project, you still can participate, but you cannot be an essential team member, meaning that you cannot be a project leader, project secretary, or treasurer, but you can just join the team and help the team with other leadership. Okay, so those are the criteria. Now, third, your project must address at least one of the 4 core YSEALI Seeds themes, YSEALI themes. It's civic engagement, education, economic growth, and sustainable development. And we'll go deeper today in looking at what those projects might look like and what those themes really mean, what they represent. Okay, now third criteria. So as I mentioned, 3 main team members, project leader, secretary, and treasurer, they must be YSEALI members from one of the 10 ASEAN nations and Timor-Leste. It is fairly easy to become a YSEALI member. You just need to go on the US Mission to ASEAN website, and in the, I believe, upper right corner, you need to punch in your information, your name, your email address, and subscribe to start receiving newsletters from YSEALI. But in order to become a YSEALI member, you must be a citizen of one of those countries I mentioned and one of those countries you see on the screen, okay? All right, the final eligibility criteria, projects must be completed between February and October 2020. Now, it does not mean that your project will end and you will not have anything, in mind to do after October 2020, we hope that your project will still be doing things and you will still be implementing and growing after your YSEALI Seeds funding is over. What we mean here is that your main activities under YSEALI Seeds funding should happen between February and October 2020, okay? So that's important to keep in mind. So these are application requirements. If you meet these requirements, you're welcome to apply for YSEALI Seeds for the Future 2020 competition. All right. All right, so what are these themes that we keep talking about, right? All right, so the four themes are economic growth, education, civic engagement, and sustainable development. And some people were asking me, well, can you give an example what would mean a project under, let's say, a theme, civic engagement or sustainable development? The best way to illustrate that and to talk about it is to bring in some examples from the current 2019 YSEALI Seeds projects, right? So let's just see how this might qualify. And again, your projects might meet a few of those themes. Some projects, for example, let me see. We might have it here. Right. So some projects, they are just under one theme, and some projects have a few. Let's look at this one, for example. So Rise Impact from Thailand. So it's an incubation program and workshops and impact venture clinic. So all in one. And it's the project that aims to engage young entrepreneurs in Thailand in social innovation development in the country. All right. So they submitted their project. What do you think, under which theme? Okay, somebody said education. Any other ideas? Any other thoughts? Type in the chat box. Civic engagement, economic growth. Yes. Okay, great. Economic growth. Right. So that was their primary theme. Again, why? Because it's directly related to impacting the economic system of the community or the city or the country. And it's specifically directed at building up the new young entrepreneurs in the country that would contribute into economic growth of the country. Okay, so but that specific project also has an education component in it. Why? Because they held educational workshops, bringing together those entrepreneurs, learning from each other, inviting different speakers, okay? So that project actually submitted their application with two themes in mind, economic growth and education, but economic growth was the primary theme that they had, and that was very clear. Okay, so let's look at another one, the Octa mission. So the team leader is from Brunei. There are other team members that are from Thailand and Malaysia, and the project took place in Thailand. And so the main premises of the project was educating young leaders on marine conservation through scuba diving trainings in Thailand. Now, what do you think? Somebody said environment. Unfortunately, if you see again all four themes that we have, environment is not one of those themes, okay? So which theme with the education? Okay, somebody typed in education. Excellent, beautiful, yes. That's great. So yes, education was the primary theme that the project submitted their proposal under. Okay, although sustainable development, just like many of you posted in the chat box, was a secondary theme as well. And here is why. Even though their main activities were educational activities, right? They created this sort of like an academy of young leaders who care about marine conservation and learning about their coastal communities. And so it was a lot of education. They created curriculum, they created specific courses, and then so the students could take the courses and learn from teachers. So primary activities are really education focused, but sustainable development is definitely the result of their project, when all of those young leaders who have gone through program could go back into their coastal communities and really impact the life of their community members by, improving the situation with marine conservation. Okay, so that would be more about towards sustainable development. Excellent. So that's great. And now let's see another example over here. So pink collar community from Malaysia. So now this project had in mind to reshape domestic work sector by empowering migrant workers and providing better hiring solutions for employers. A beautiful project. A few young females from Malaysia who recognize that, you know, something is not working as properly as they hoped within the domestic worker sector and decided that they need to address the issues that are happening. Okay, excellent. You guys are so smart. So you started already typing in civic engagement. Excellent. Yes. So civic engagement is the main theme of the project Pink Collar Community. Why? Because they're engaging the larger portions of the community members and diverse groups of community members into a dialogue about us coexisting coherently together, abiding the laws of the country, and also providing good quality of life and work for community members, large community members, right? And educating the domestic workers about their rights and the employers about their rights and freedoms as well. So it's a beautiful civic engagement themed project, but again, this secondary theme in this project was also education, just because some of those activities that took place during the project were educational, and they were also designing beautiful journals and different reflection materials for the domestic workers to use during their employment time. Okay. All right, so the last example today I wanted to bring, and I hope that this is helpful for you all to see what we mean by different themes, okay? So the last project I want to share about today is Sky Beside Televisions Lab from Indonesia. So you probably have seen or heard about this project. So it's a beautiful project that is aimed, basically it's a technology laboratory that helps address the water, energy, food nexus challenges in Indonesia specifically. So yeah, somebody already started saying sustainable development. Excellent. So sustainable development is definitely the primary theme in this project. And this is very straightforward, just like you guessed in the chat box here, is that the team members and the leaders are aiming to really provide sustainable development practices for the communities in Indonesia and spread those technologies that can help help the communities progress in their ways for addressing different issues regarding food and water and energy that is current in Indonesia. Okay, so very simple and easy. I hope this was illustrative enough for you to understand what we mean by each theme. Again, I invite you to think about what one primary theme your project addresses, and if there is any secondary or third theme that you see your project might go under. At the same time, you know, try not to submit the project for absolutely every single theme that you see on the screen. You know, sometimes it's not helpful to try to, you know, chase every single opportunity. You lose the scope in that case, and you lose the strength of your proposal if you try to chase too many themes, right? So for us, when we select projects, it's not about how many themes you are submitting your application under. It's really about the strength of your project and the ability of your project to live longer after your YSEALI Seeds funding is over, okay? All right, so hope that helps. And I see that some questions are coming in the chat box, or I mean in the question answer box over here. And I will be referring to them at the end of the presentation as well, as well as Nalindra, my colleague, also trying to answer them as they come. Okay, let's see. So now for those of you who are wondering, okay, great, I meet all of the eligibility criteria, I have a perfect project for this program competition, what do I do next? Well, next is YSEALiSeeds.org. That's the website for our program where you can find the link for your YSEALI Seeds application, all right? And we will actually now switch and go to that link and see how the application will look like. And we'll go through each portion of the application now. Okay. All right. Can you all see the screen right now with the website? I hope you can. If you can, could you please type in the chat box, just so I know that you can see the YSEALI Seeds website? Okay, excellent. So now let me quickly organize over here. For those of you who just joined again, make sure that you utilize the chat box for specific presentation related matters, for example, to let me know if the sound goes off or something like that. But now we also have question answer box down below on the bottom of your screen to type in any questions that you might have, and we will try to address those questions at the end of the presentation. Now back to YSEALI Seeds website. Okay, so here is the list of all of the webinars that will be happening, and a very important frequently asked questions section as well, where you can find answers to some of the questions that you already have. So I encourage you to check that first. You can also see some of the projects of the month and read about them and learn what kinds of projects people submitted their proposals for and eventually won and actually implemented their projects. You can read also about the rest of our grantees over here as well. But I want right now for us, what I want us to do is to click on this apply button, and it's going to take us to the YSEALI application, YSEALI Seeds application. Let me make sure that we can all see that. Okay, excellent. All right. So now please read more carefully these instructions on the bottom, on the upper side of the application. It's very important. There are very helpful tips and recommendations here for you to follow to be selected for the program. And then once you complete reading these instructions, you can start actually working on your application itself. It's not very long. We require information about the project leader. And some of the fields are mandatory fields. For example, your citizenship. We must know a citizen of which country you are. Same for the project secretary, project treasurer. And then we also require some project background information, for example, name of the project. So name of the project, it's not your name, not your grandma's name, it's an actual name of the project that you are submitting proposal for, okay? So we understand that the name might change, after you are selected for YSEALI Seeds. Maybe you didn't have time or resources to come up with a really perfect name. That's okay. You will have about a week or so after you select it to really solidify and choose your final name of the project. But just for the purpose for us to know what project you are really submitting for, use the section to name your project something, okay? Then the next section is YSEALI theme. You need to choose one of these four for sure. If you have more than one, you can click on more than one themes. And then home nation of the project team members. So if you have other team members besides the project leader, secretary, and treasurer that are joining your project and they are representing some other countries, please mark that. We would like to know that. Another thing here is nations in which project will take place. Now, this is very important. This is very important just because we want to know, are you planning to implement your project, let's say, only in one country or in a few countries? And for example, sometimes, a project secretary could be from one country, project leader from another country. So we really need to know in which country exactly are you going to do your project, okay? So make sure to mark that. And then another section is describe the team's previous involvement with YSEALI. All right, so we just want to know if you've had any previous opportunities or experiences with YSEALI Network. Maybe you participated in some local YSEALI workshops or YSEALI Academic Fellowship or anything like that. Let us know. If you did not have any, that's okay too. This is definitely something we're not going to hold against you if you have not had previous involvement. It's just helpful for us to know, to have a fuller understanding of your project, okay? So city or region in which project will be implemented is important for us to know, just because some countries are very large and there might be, several specific objectives or issues happening within the country. So it's nice for us to know specifically what city are you going to impact with your project. All right. So, and again, I see some questions coming in the chat. Please, if you don't mind, posting those questions in the question answer box. In this case, we can track your questions after the webinar. They're not going to disappear, and my colleague Nalindra will be able to answer some of those as well. So, if you don't mind, just copy pasting it into the questions section. Okay. All right, so back here. Now, the most important, not the most, but one of the most important portions of your YSEALI Seeds application is the support documents, okay? So number one thing, you will be submitting resumes of leadership members, your project leader, the secretary, and the treasurer. We will talk about that in a minute. Now, the second document we want you to upload is the project abstract. Okay, so this is a very short version of the description of your proposal, okay? The next is the project description. Now, it's the full version of your proposal that we want you to submit. Next is the project budget. And we actually have a downloadable project budget template over here. By clicking on that, you can download it and use it for your application submission. Now, if you have any issues with downloading it, you can always email us at yseali@culturalvistas.org. I will show that email at the very end of our presentation. Or Nalindra can type it in the chat over here so everybody know that email address. So in the email address, or actually it's even right here at the end of the application, so never mind, over here. So yseali@culturalvistas.org, and I will send you the template if you have troubles accessing it, okay? All right, so the final, not mandatory, but an additional portion of support documents that you can upload is, and actually we call it support documents. It means any additional maybe handouts or presentation or charts or photos or anything like that, but only up to 5 pages. You can upload it here. So if you think that this additional documents can help support your project or actually help explain your proposal better or help add some more background to the issue you're working on. So feel free to use that place to submit this extra documents. And then the very final portion of your application in terms and conditions, make sure to click on all of these. By clicking on this, you're certified that you provided correct and true information about yourself and your team, and this is very important. And then click submit only when you're ready. When you uploaded everything looks great and you're ready to submit, okay? So let me go back to our presentation here, okay, over here. So we can go in depth about your portions of the application. So with the project team, I received some emails, people asking about the resumes, how they should look like, or CV, resume or CV. In some parts of the world, you know, people refer to resume as CV. So the resume should be no longer than 2 pages for each team member, okay? So here I want you to really keep in mind that quality is better than quantity. Okay, and we want you to provide relevant information. For example, I know you're all accomplished leaders and you probably started doing amazing things since kindergarten, okay? But it doesn't mean that if you did a really nice, let's say, dance in the kindergarten and your entire family came to watch you and it was great, it doesn't mean that that's very relevant for your YSEALI Seeds project that has absolutely nothing to do with dance, okay? So be very smart and very proactive and strategic. So put the relevant information for us. Why? It's because we review hundreds and hundreds of applications for YSEALI Seeds, and we absolutely cannot, you know, read absolutely every single detail on the resume. We really skim through and look into the very relevant information, and sometimes it's not helpful if you have a lot of other things that might not be relevant, and it just confuses the reader in terms of why are you listing all of those accomplishments, achievements, or experiences if they have absolutely nothing to do with your project, okay? So be strategic, show us that you had some leadership experience in the past, show us that you truly care about the issue you are submitting your project for, show us some previous employment you know, information and things like that, but be strategic again. I hope that covers that. And now So who are these three people we keep talking about, these three team members? So the project leader. So the project leader is somebody who will be the head of the implementation of your project. And this is somebody who would be communicating responsibilities to the rest of the team, somebody who makes sure that the project is on track with all of the YSEALI Seeds requirements, somebody who would be leading the discussion on how project will be implemented, and somebody who is committed to regular communication with the rest of the team and the funder. And by the funder, we mean us, right? So whoever gives you the YSEALI Seeds funding. So I will be monitoring and actually working with the project implementers next year. So it means that you will be communicating with me and my team on all of the YSEALI Seeds implementation matters. And this is very important, okay? So choose carefully who needs to be your project leader. It's somebody who is really responsible, has a lot of leadership experience, and actually will be committed to staying on top of the communication and implementation points. Okay. Now your project secretary will be in charge of completing and submitting good quality monthly reports and updates about the project. So not only monthly, but also midterm and final reports. It doesn't mean that the secretary is the only one actually putting together this project. It could be a team effort, but the project secretary is the one who will be actually, if need be, could be calling up your team members and say, hey, project secretary, you need to submit me the budget. I cannot submit my monthly report, so submit it. So basically, you see what I'm saying? The project secretary is somebody who is on top and keeping track and making sure that everything is submitted on time. Why is this important? Well, if we do not receive good quality monthly reports from you, we do not know how your project is going, right? We can definitely stalk you on social media. Of course, I'm joking, but we can see some things on social media. But if we do not know specific achievements or accomplishments or things that are happening with your project, we don't know if the project is happening at all, okay? That's why it's very, very important for continuation of your funding. And as I mentioned here on the slide as well, this person must be very organized. If you do not provide up-to-date reports about status of your project, this could result in loss of the YSEALI Seeds funding, okay? So also project secretary is somebody who will be managing the communications and social media as well, okay? So choose carefully. And the third essential leader, or not leader, essential team member is a project treasurer. So project treasurer, somebody who handles all of the finances of the YSEALI Seeds grant for your project. Somebody who will keep all the receipts and will keep track of the expenses in accordance with the approved budget that you will be submitting for your proposal, okay? So this person should be trustworthy, organized, and also have a bank account to receive the YSEALI Seeds funds. This person will also be in charge of monthly expense reports. Once the expense reports is created, the treasurer will be sending this report to secretary. So the secretary will include it in the monthly report that they will be sending to me, okay? So that's very, very important as well. A couple of points here. Why we want these three team members to work together? Well, the practice and experience in the past shows that the successful project cannot really sustain itself and live longer if there's only one person working on that, only one person in charge, okay? So after experiencing different things and trying different things, we realize that the best model and the best success model is when there are three dedicated people working together on the project and they delegating responsibilities, and each person has their own sort of scope of responsibilities, and that really helps support the holistic or wholesome implementation of the project. So that's very, very important to keep in mind, okay? All right, and again, thanks for the questions that are coming in. We will try address those questions at the end of the webinar for sure, if we haven't done so already. And keep writing your questions in the Q&A box. The chat box is just for us to check the sound and other housekeeping moments. All right, everybody. A few more things for us to cover, and we will dive into many, many questions that you already submitted. So many people asked, what is the project abstract and how we should craft it? And even in the past, competitions, I noticed that people would submit absolutely anything under the sun as a project abstract, okay? What I want you to think about is that your project abstract is just a very short version of your proposal. It's a very concise, very clever, and very straightforward summary of what your project is all about. We really look at the project abstract because it helps us understand what your overall proposal is going to be about and really dive deeper into that. But it's very essential that you craft a good, clear, and concise project abstract. You have only 100 words for the project abstract, and I want you to strategically think about how you're going to craft that and write just a few sentences that will answer these questions below. So in a first and second sentence, answer the question what your project is about and why. Okay, so don't forget the why. You need to connect the project with why you're doing this project, okay? Very short and concise. Now, the next sentence could be how are you going to make it happen? So your proposed activities or events or other interventions that are going to happen. Then the last sentence in your project abstract is what is the anticipated result? So what are you hoping to achieve, or what's going to be the impact? How are you going to impact? Like what is going to be the aftermath of your project implementation, okay? Again, this is a very short version of your proposal, so do not go into the detailed background. You will have your project proposal for that. This is just a short version of your application project abstract, okay? Now, project description is the full version of your proposal. And here I'm just giving you a sample model of how you can break down logically what you're going to submit. So your proposal is 1,000 words. Now, this is enough for you to be strategic, clear, concise, but also explain some key points about your project, right? So in order to stand out from the pool of applicants that are going to be coming this month, I want you to be very logical, and just when you read that proposal, make sure that you understand it yourself, that your team members understand it, that other readers around you, your friends or family, when they look at the proposal, they also clearly understand what you're trying to do, how you're going to do it, and why. Okay, so think about it. Break down your proposal into 3 main sections: introduction, body of the statement, and conclusion. Now, your introduction is just 1 or 2 paragraphs where you briefly outline the project, right? When you talk about what this project is about. The body of the statement is the main portion of your proposal. It can consist of several paragraphs. On the slides, I only propose 3 paragraphs, but it doesn't mean that it's only 3. It can be 4. It might be 5, as long as you are within 1,000 words limit, okay? So in the first paragraph of your body of the statement, you can give us some background and the why. So the background of why this issue is so relevant to you, why this issue is so pressing in the community, why you feel like you need to address this issue, okay? Then in the second paragraph here, talk about your proposed solution and plan. Well, since you told us the background and why this issue is so pressing, well, tell us how you're going to address it. What are the events, activities, interventions? What are the plans that you have to really address the issue you care about so much? Now, in the third paragraph of this body of the statement, talk about what kind of outcome or an impact you anticipate. It's very important. If you have not thought about what would be the outcome of your project, well, then you probably should really rethink submitting your proposal altogether. It's very, very important for you to be a very long-term thinking leader who anticipates and thinks and plans some outcomes and impact of your project, right? Now, of course, we understand that some of the impact and some of the outcome might be different depending on how the project is going, right? We understand that, we recognize that. But nevertheless, we want you to at least anticipate and maybe write a few words on how you're going to measure that impact or that outcome if you have any specific tools for that. All right, so now the final concluding paragraph or conclusion is the paragraph that kind of brings together your introduction, where you talk about, you know, the project overall, what the project is about, and the body of your statement. So maybe here it's your final point where you can really say why you're doing what you're doing and how the specific proposal is going to address the issue, right? So it might be a little repetitive, but try to use it strategically to bring an extra point or an extra thought in here to really conclude your overall proposal. Okay, so this is a strategy. This is, again, not a requirement. This is just one of the ideas and one of the tools out there to help you strategize your thinking process and help you really create something that logical, helps the reader understand what you mean, and, you know, help you and your team be on the same page as well. I also encourage you to participate in reading the proposal together, right? So maybe a few of you will be writing different kinds of paragraphs, right? Well, then make sure that somebody else will read the proposal together and really understands it and can sign off on that, okay? Now, another point here is the budget, right? So it's something that everybody wanted to talk about, I suppose. So the YSEALI Seeds budget is one of the essential documents. Why? It's because it shows us your financial maturity. It shows us that you know how to use finances in a smart way. It shows us that you are trustworthy and you understand what it takes for you to implement your project and how to use those resources in a smart way, okay? So you will be submitting your budgets and you will be using your current your local currency. That's okay. Some of you will choose to use US dollars. That's fine. You can do that. If you decide to use your local currency, you can use one of the currency converters that we use in our organization. It's called OANDA, O-A-N-D-A. So it's nice to check, you know, the currency rate at the time of your budget submission. Of course, we understand that the currency fluctuations might affect things and your total amounts might change, and we will be discussing that once you are selected, of course. But again, if it helps for you to bring everything to the dollar amount, do so as well. Let me switch to the actual budget so we can take a look at that more in detail together. Okay. Let me know if you can see it okay. Can you see the budget right now, the template on your screen? If you can just type in the chat box below so I know that you can see the document. Yes, excellent. Thank you, guys. Okay. All right, so let's discuss what we have here. Overall, your total maximum that you can ask from the YSEALI Seeds program is $15,000. You can ask less than that, but you cannot ask more than that. So I saw a couple of projects submitted their proposals for like $16,000 or $17,000. Well, unfortunately, you cannot ask that amount because the limit is 15. So think accordingly. Okay, so your project title is important. So use the same project title as your project name. Okay, project location is where your project is going to take place. That's important for us to know when we look into the budget expenses, just because some cities or countries, you know, might have a higher expense rates and some might have lower, and it's very important for us to understand, to see the whole picture here. Okay, then the total amount requested over here. So this is the amount that you are asking from YSEALI Seeds. Now it could be $15,000, like I said, it could be less, whatever you calculate. The next line here is the cost share. So what does cost share mean? Usually cost share, it's an additional funding or contributions that you are going to be using in addition to the YSEALI Seeds funding. Some of you might be representing some nonprofit organizations, NGOs, or other private entities, and maybe those private entities or organizations are willing to, let's say, donate their office spaces for you to use for your activities. So that could be a cost share. If you have a monetary value, meaning that you have some specific number for how much that a approximately cost, well, this could be considered as a cost share that you can add here. In other cases, some organizations, or maybe you secured some other funding from other competitions or organizations to use for your project, great, and you can put that number over here as well. Again, if you don't have cost share, that's okay. If you do have cost share, that's great. For us, it just helps us see that somebody else also has so much faith in your project that they decided to support you financially, and it strengthens your overall case. Okay. Now, I ask you like strongly to read instructions here because it's very important. Last year, I did see some of the budgets submitted who never read the instructions, and that made them get disqualified right away. So do not do that to yourself. If your project is great, make sure that you follow all of the instructions. Okay, so for example, some of the common mistake I saw is that, well, item number 2 over here, that some projects will request sustained staff salaries or cover office space or overhead expenses within their YSEALI Seeds funding, even though it is not allowed. Okay, so other things that are not allowed under YSEALI Seeds funding is international airfare to and from the United States. For example, if you are doing a workshop and you have a speaker in the United States who decided that they can come, you know, and do some mentorship or some work for you, well, that speaker cannot, so their travel expenses cannot be covered under YSEALI Seeds budget, okay? So, but if your speakers and team members are flying within ASEAN region, that is allowed, that can be, so that's fine. Your YSEALI Seeds funding can cover those international flights within the area, within the, when it makes sense, okay? Again, so YSEALI Seeds funding cannot cover large items of durable equipment. For example, if you need to buy a helicopter or airplane, of course, like I'm joking here, it's not enough money to buy that. But for example, something very large, like a large computer, or I don't know, some kind of like a very fancy professional camera or something like that. So typically that equipment is not, the purchase of that equipment is not allowed under YSEALI Seeds funding, but I want to say that in some cases, if your project specifically requires some activities that absolutely must have one of those items or equipment purchases, please let us know. We can definitely talk about that in detail, and we can honor your request in some specific cases, okay? And just like it says over here, a reasonable request for equipment will be considered on case-by-case basis, okay? So another thing that is not allowed under YSEALI Seeds funding is excessive representational meals or entertainment. For example, if we see that on your budget, all of the expenses that you request funding for is just restaurants and, you know, eating somewhere, eating out somewhere, and just having some big parties and things like that, and then there is no other expenses of that, that are relevant to your project, well, this would be very suspicious and kind of strange. So, but at the same time, I want to say that if you need to feed your volunteers, if you have some kind of meetings or workshops and you need to order some catering and things like that, that's definitely fine, that's allowed. I'm just telling that it needs to be smart and wise and within the scope of your project and needs to make sense, okay? Now, another thing that is not allowed to put in your budget is any funding that goes towards academic research. So this is not an academic research type of project. This is a project to really implement during the 9-month. So think about some activities that you can fund rather than a research, okay? So, and the final point that is not allowed is funding to any partisan political activity. So there, if you have any even slightly remotely related to political activity type of project, well, I want you to rethink that, just because YSEALI Seeds cannot fund any political activity of any sort. So just make sure that you stay within the guidelines and the limits. All right, so the budget overall, we broke it down for you, and again, the totals will be calculated automatically, so you do not need to worry about that. But we just broke it down as an example, into supplies, travel, personnel, and other. You can change it around depending on what your project really needs and requires. It's up to you. But I want you to make sure that everything makes sense here, and somebody from outside of your project can still look at the budget and make sense of what you are requesting, okay? Under supplies, you can put any, for example, you need to buy some paper to print some brochures, so things like that, or you need to buy some bags or different tokens to give out to your participants or volunteers. Under unit cost, you put how much one unit will be, right? So you put, for example, $6 for 1 unit, and then your total is going to be how many you're going to units you're going to purchase. Okay. Let's see. So under travel, yeah. So any, for example, local transportation that you need, or your team needs, or your volunteers need, or some flights between among the ASEAN, in the ASEAN region could be included here as well. Again, cost per unit will be included for over here, and then number of flights or units, right? And then the total will be calculated here as well. For example, let's say under travel we do, and when you do flights, please tell us, from where to where. So for example, Hanoi to Jakarta and back. All right. And for example, the cost of that round trip flight would be, for example, $100, for example, right? And then number of flights, for example, you need to buy 2 flights. Well, then it's calculated automatically. So if it's $100 per flight and you're buying 2 of those round trip flights, it means 200. But then here, if you want to be even more detailed, I would encourage you to even say for who these flights is. For example, leader and treasurer, for example. Okay. And then even more specifically, you can say first workshop for your project or something like that. Now, this gives me a lot of details and I can understand, okay, so they're not just flying in again to see their family or something like that. They're flying in because they have their first workshop, and that first workshop has already been described within their proposal, so everything makes sense. Okay, I understand, we approve. Okay, so now under personnel, you can put, for example, you might need to pay a small stipend to a speaker that you invite. That speaker, for example, had to travel a lot, and just like a very renowned speaker. So you might want to include a small stipend or a fee, which should be only a one-time payment. Under personnel, you cannot put any specific stipends that are long-term, for example, nine months worth of stipend or salary, right? That would be considered a salary. But if it's a one-time stipend fee, you can include it under personnel. Sometimes some volunteers in some cases might be allowed to receive a stipend as well. So in this case, you would also put like volunteers for first workshop in Hanoi, for example, or something like that. And then you put again cost per unit, which means maybe like $10 or something like that, and how many, and then your total. Now under other, you can put anything else that does not go under these 3 categories. So in the past, I've seen people putting under other, for example, the website hosting, right? So you can use your YSEALI Seeds funding to really develop your website, pay for the Facebook advertisement or any other social media like advertisement campaigns to really push your project and really engage with public. Definitely can use your YSEALI Seeds funding for that. In fact, you should use your YSEALI Seeds funding for that. So you can put everything here. Sometimes some projects will invite an external expert. We understand that not all of you are, let's say, graphic designers or website designers. That's fine. You can invite a specific person to work on, let's say, a graphic design for your brand or something, or your logo or something like that, and pay a small fee for that. So this is also allowed. Again, what would look strange and probably would make me ask you more questions if it's disproportionate. For example, everything else looks fine, and then all of a sudden graphic designer for developing website is like $10,000, right? So this would not be allowed just because the majority of your funding will go towards this one person doing one thing for your project, and what are you left with? Just the remaining. Okay, so make sure to be smart about it, concise, but also provide some relevant information just so we understand what this funding is for and where is this going to go. If you have any doubts, if you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to email me, and me and my team will get back to you with some specific answers or maybe examples in terms of what can and cannot go into your YSEALI Seeds budget. Again, your budget is very important. By looking at your budget within your proposal, we see how smart you are with the money, how responsible you are with the money, and what kind of planning and future visionary leadership you have within what you put in your budget expenses. Okay, so let me go back into the slides quickly, and then we'll jump into questions again. All right, I hope you can see the slides now. Please let me know in the chat if you can see the slides again. Excellent, thank you. All right, so the final portion, and just before some questions disappear, I just want to encourage those who joined recently, if you could please copy paste your questions in the Q&A or question answer box rather than chat, just so we don't lose any questions and we'll address them. That would be great. Okay. So the last point here is additional documents. As you remember, I mentioned in the application. So your additional documents could be up to 5 pages. You can include slides or charts or photos or you know, any specific convincing additional documents that will help strengthen your case. Okay, for example, maybe you have a photo of the area that you consider is so in need of your project, and then you specifically explain, you know, how your project is going to make that area better, not just by cleaning it. Maybe you're planning on redesigning, reshaping that community space into some kind of a playground or something like that, right? So, and the visual representation helps us understand what you really mean by showing us that specific area that may be broken down and is not livable, and kind of the community avoids or things like that, and then what you're hoping to do instead. So that's a very nice example of how you can bring some visual representation within your additional documents. Again, you can also add some quick slides or maybe a few pages explaining the issue in depth, something that, you know, you didn't go quite in depth in your proposal, so you want to talk more about that, you can add it there as well. Again, be strategic. It's important that it's relevant, so up to 5 pages, no more. All right, and again, so if you have any questions, definitely feel free to email us at yseali@culturalvistas.org for any questions that we did not answer. So let me now jump into, we still have a few minutes left. I will jump into the questions over here. And as you saw, some of the questions were answered by my colleague Nalindra here, and some of the questions I'll address right now. So I'll read them out loud since not many of you can see them. So the question is, what are the very needed details for the resumes of leadership? Is there a template that we can use for the resume thing? Okay, so Hussein asked that. So Hussein, there is no specific template that we require you to use. You can use any template that you prefer, you like. Everybody are different. Each country have their own maybe specific requirements or templates. Therefore, we do not refer to a specific template. What I want you to think is that just bring the relevant experience and relevant items on your resume that really related to your project, related to showcase your leadership, your previous experience, involvement with YSEALI. So those kinds of things are very relevant and important. And again, 1 page is better than 4. Obviously, the requirement is 1 to 2 pages per each resume. so of each team member. Please submit a resume of each team member, meaning your leadership, project leader, treasurer, and secretary. You do not need to submit resumes of all 20, project team members that you have. Only 3 essential team members is enough. And again, up to 2 pages for each person. I hope that answers that. So any template photo is not required for your resume. I saw some people include the photo. In the United States, typically photo is not required. In fact, it's not used. In some other parts of the world, photos are still included on the resume, so it's really up to you. Use your best judgment. But again, be strategic. Okay, excellent. Thank you. So Hussein, excellent. So now next question. Can we apply for YSEALI Seeds if our project is already running? So it will depend. If your project is in a really like a starting stages, and you just starting some small initiatives, and you really need that YSEALI Seeds funding to get going and really grow and boost your impact, definitely apply. But again, we will have to look into your proposal to define that, but I do encourage you to apply. In fact, some of our projects, if you remember, I was talking about pin collar community. Well, they already started something. They were already working on this employment agency, and now YSEALI Seeds funding really helped them grow and gain some momentum and reach to many different stakeholders. Same for a Cambodian project, Tesdopi, who created the application that also was a grassroots initiative, and then with the YSEALI Seeds funding, they really grew their audience and were able to oversee their reach and their impact and things like that. So definitely we are looking for something that will be sustainable and that will grow and keep on living after your seeds funding is over. So yes. Okay, next question. Zach is asking, what is the budget range? How much can we ask as maximum? So we answered that. $15,000 is the maximum you can ask for this specific program. You can ask less than that, but no more than $15,000. Okay, so somebody on the chat is asking if the video will be uploaded into YouTube immediately. So it's going to be uploaded within the day, so sometime maybe in the next few hours, as soon as our IT team is in the office here in Washington, D.C. It's very early in the morning, so we will upload it into the YouTube channel, and it's Cultural Vista's YouTube channel. So yes, so next question here regarding proposal, could give us a proposal example. It's about introduction, first paragraph, and so forth. So again, so we addressed each portion of the application today. So hopefully that answers some of your questions, or what needs to go into the abstract versus your proposal overall, the full version of proposal. And again, sometimes it's helpful to see the previous version of the proposal from somebody else, and sometimes it's not. And the reason why is because there are multiple reasons why some winning projects from previous years got selected. Okay, and some of those reasons could be not just their proposal, but maybe some other things, like their specific team that was working on that, maybe specific support that they received from the stakeholders, other things. So it's not just the proposal that was winning in the past that needs to be replicated and followed by everybody else. Okay, so we want you to be creative and open-minded and craft something on your own rather than looking at the proposals that other people submitted in the past. I personally believe that this is better strategy than looking, and then you subconsciously would be still referring back to what you saw in the example. Okay, so try to use that. Sorry, can help you more on that. So another question here. Hi, are we allowed to request for per diem for speakers? If this is possible, is there any minimum value to be given, or as long as the value is reasonable? Thanks in advance. Good question. So you are allowed to ask for per diems for speakers, or maybe like volunteers. And again, use your best judgment, and it needs to be a reasonable amount for sure. It does not need to be more than the average per diem that is used within organizations in your country. And again, in each country, it might be slightly different. So use a very reasonable amount, something that does not look strange on your budget, and it does not take up much of your budget. Okay. All right. So somebody's also asking about the PowerPoint slides that I had today in the YouTube channel. I will be sending this to you all via email since you logged in with your email today. So you will all receive the copy of the slides and the link to the video recording of this webinar in the next couple of hours. So is laptop considered for the funding is the question. So unfortunately, this is something we will have to look at case by case. Typically, laptop is considered an equipment item, and if it's a quite expensive equipment item, it will take up a lot of your budget. This might not be allowed, but again, we will have to look into your specific case and see maybe like in the past in some projects it was cheaper to buy a laptop than rent a laptop. So in this case, of course, it's more definitely reasonable to buy it. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. Will an allowance per day be allowed if we are all traveling to one country for the project? So I think I answered that already. So it is allowed, again, within the reason, and you need to just explain. So then Rena is asking if the project is train the trainer to village area, is buying a projector and an overhead. Oh, you mean buying a projector is considered to be an overhead? No, overhead expense is usually when you, for example, renting an office and paying electricity bills and water bills and things like that. So that would be an overhead expense. Buying a projector, again, just like with the laptop, it's case by case situation. In your case, it might be allowed and it might make sense more than, you know, renting a projector, for example. So yes, submit your proposal and make an explanation in the budget and we will take a look at that. So a few more minutes left for us. Okay, let's see. Another question is, I have the idea about helping villagers to create value-added products, for example, creating mango snacks, etc. I wonder if we can invest in the packaging. What do you mean we can invest in the packaging? Do you mean if you can use YSEALI Seeds funding to create packaging for those kinds of things? Yes, I can say it should be fine. I just need to really see the proposal overall and see, you know, what's your strategy here? What's your plan? How are you going to, you know, impact the community with that and things like that. So just by looking at your question, yeah, you can submit your proposal and we'll take a look into that further. So again, next question is the project is train the trainer to village area buying a projector and overhead expense? We had that question. How about laptops or DSL cameras? So we also addressed that, Hussein, I believe. So another question, ideally, what % of the budget can be used to each category? Great question, Collins. So ideally, within 20% of, you know, the budget for each category, no more, I would say. Again, it would look very strange if most of your project goes towards travel and then, you know, nowhere else. So try to be wise and use within 20%, I would say. But again, some projects are more travel heavy, like one of our projects this year in Myanmar. Most of their activities were really traveling to different regions and locations with their STEM education game. So of course that made sense that most of their funding went towards travel, but there was still some funding that went towards other items as well. If you have doubts or questions, we'll definitely work on that with you as well, if you're selected especially. Okay, let's see. Do we need to provide sources of the cost in the budget? If yes, where do we put them? Provide sources of the cost. What do you mean sources of the cost? I'm not sure what you mean by that. So if you can clarify, please, or email us and I will be able to answer your question. So now the next one, can funds be used in buying computing services? We already answered that. So if you are using this to, let's say, a web hosting or something like that, definitely you can use the funding. But if you are referring to buying a computer, well, it's case by case basis. We need to see why would you need to buy a computer versus rent it or use your own or things like that. Next question is, I can use the grant to pay for coordinators, right? I might need to know a little bit more about that, Ian. So if you want to send me an email, please do. Again, if you are referring to paying a one-time stipend or maybe per diem fee for your coordinator for a specific event, then yes, it's allowed. If you're referring to more sustained stipend, month-to-month stipend, then no, YSEALI Seeds cannot allow that. What is the duration of funds? So the duration of your program is approximately 9 months. So you will be, if you are selected, you will receive an award letter in January, and you will receive your first funding batch in February. Okay. And then you start working on your project. You will submit your midterm report approximately in July. And then after that, you will receive your second batch of funding from what you requested. And then at the very end, you will complete your project in November. And after that, you will receive your final batch of funding. Okay. So yes, important thing to mention here is that you do not receive all the funding altogether in one lump sum. You will be receiving it in 3 different batches throughout your project implementation. Okay, just a couple more questions here, and the rest we'll definitely address either in our following webinars or through the emails. So the question here, we are applying to grants include seed for the future in the same time, which means we haven't received it. Do we have to write the other grant we are applying in our proposal? It doesn't hurt to mention. You can mention that you're applying for another grant as well, and let us know what's your plan if you receive both. You know, how would your budget look like if you do? Okay, next question. Can you explain again on the buying of durable equipment? Can buying office appliances be permissible? Generally, no. Office appliances is not allowed unless you mean, you know, some specific maybe like pens and paper, things like that, something that you will actually use in the duration of your project. YSEALI Seeds funding cannot be used for decorating your office, buying furniture for your office or computer printers and things like that. Okay, so, and again, everything is on case-by-case basis. If there is a specific reason and need for you to buy a table for your office because your project depends on that, please let us know and we can definitely discuss that in details, or you can write in the budget in the explanation section. Budget allow phone bill for project members. Yes, if your project heavily relies on making phone calls, then yes, your YSEALI Seeds funding can allow that. We just, again, need an explanation and reasoning why. There is so many phone calls that you need to use funding to cover that, okay? So then budget allow per diem for project members and participants, for example, government staff. I'm not sure what you mean here. Do you mean that is YSEALI Seeds budget allowed to cover per diem for government employees that participate in your project? Well, if they come as like a speaker or something like that, and if that does not go against your specific country's regulations, then probably yes. But if it's some kind of like funding that you're giving to your government, that would be very tricky. Again, it does not need to look like a political activity of any sorts, because YSEALI Seeds funding, again, does not sponsor any political activity. So you might want to send me an email for specific clarifications on that. So PowerPoint slides, you will receive that. Somebody was asking, let's see what else. Will it be early January, late January when we get the approval? So everybody will be notified by the end of December, maybe early January if you were selected for the project, for the YSEALI Seeds program overall. So those teams who are selected will receive an email, and we will send you your award letter with all of the explanation of what this means to be a winner of the YSEALI Seeds. Okay, so in 2 last questions, look at us, we are really good on time. So will we get a successful notification when we submit the project? So if you mean, so once you submit your application, you will receive a quick notification on the screen saying that, you know, your project has been submitted successfully, we received it. So if you mean, will you receive notification if your project is selected? Yes, so we will be sending an email to everybody after the selection process is over. and we identified the winners, we will send an email to the winners, and we'll also send the email to everybody else who submitted their application and were not selected. Okay? So regardless, you will receive an email at the end of December, but I would want you to wait until probably beginning of January, just because things might get busy with different holidays coming in. So wait until January before you start sending your emails and inquiring about your application. Okay, so if I want to rent a room for my workshop, not for months, only for once or twice before my main project, does that count as an overhead expense? No, this is very much allowed. So if you need to rent a room for a specific activity, you know, just once or twice, that's definitely great. And this is what your YSEALI Seeds funding should be used for. It is not an overhead expense. Overhead expense, if you already have an office within your current organization and you want to use YSEALI Seeds funding to cover rent or electricity bills for that existing office, that would be an overhead expense. Okay, so, and the last question of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so what is the project will be implemented in the month of February and will be finished in the month of March? Is that okay? I would be a little bit skeptical of that, quite honestly, just because you mean the same year. For example, you start your project in February of 2020 and you finished it in March 2020, right? So typically, no, this is not something within the, oh, thanks, Hussein. So it's not something within the scope of YSEALI Seeds. We really want to see you, unless you have an explanation of how you're going to, like what else you're going to do with your project. Is that going to be a long-term sustainable impact on your community? Otherwise, it just looks like a 1-minute type of activity that is one and done, and then we don't know why would you, you know, why can't you do it without the YSEALI Seeds funding? Why can't you go and do it right now if it's not a, you know, sort of labor intense or funding intense type of project? Again, I don't want to say no right away. I just want to see the proposal and the explanation. If there is explanation for why you want to just do this project 1 month and then you have some kind of plan for the next 5 years, then yeah, sure, let me know. Okay. So, and somebody is asking how many winners will we get for the grants. Again, last year we had over 400 applications and we selected 21 projects. So it's highly competitive, very selective process. This year we might select slightly more. So it might be 24 projects, but again, there's going to be a lot of applications. So please put your thoughts and good work into those applications. Thank you so much for all your questions and participating today. It's definitely a wonderful opportunity to really explain things, and hopefully it was helpful for you. Again, this will be uploaded into Cultural Vista's YouTube channel, and I will send an email to everybody at the end. And again, thanks so much for your participation. Email us and we'll welcome you next week, next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Jakarta time. Thank you, everybody. Bye.